Never again. This statement is engraved on memorials scattered across the breadth of Europe, forming one of the last visible remnants of the Holocaust, in which over 6 million Jews would perish. Yet despite the grasp of the Third Reich, groups undeterred by fear rose up and resisted the crushing impositionment of the Nazis and its associates. These groups varied in both size and magnitude, from small families like the Dutch Overstegens in joining the Dutch resistance, through to the actions of the hundreds in the Warsaw Ghetto, or the thousands who valiantly fought for the Jewish Military Union. With the occupation of the Netherlands occurring in May 1940, the Dutch Overstegens saw the implementation of forced Jewish relocations from Amsterdam, resulting in the Dutch Jewish population of the Netherlands decreasing from 150,000 to a mere 5,000 individuals throughout the course of the war. For sisters Freddie and Truus Overstegen, they witnessed this firsthand in their city of Haarlem. The late Freddie stated in 2016 that she recollected Germans banging on doors that made so much noise you'd hear it in the entire neighborhood. It was very frightening. Thus, wanting to liberate their nation, Freddie and Truus joined the Dutch Resistance, a fleeting yet determined organization consisting of figures from the clergy, the former military, and everyday Dutch citizens who wanted to make a difference. It cannot be understated how much courage the Overstegens would have had to muster in order to join the resistance, given that Freddie at the time was only 13 and Truus 16. Being a 16-year-old myself, it is inspiring to see how both sisters put their own lives on the line in order to stop the everyday injustices that they were forced to witness. Both would have had so much to look forward to in life if they had just turned a blind eye. Yet they knew it would mean nothing if others were not allowed to have those very same experiences due to their race or beliefs. This was why both sisters went ahead with conducting missions for the resistance, even though the result was oftentimes the tragic loss of life for both sides. In some cases, Truus stated that it poisoned the beautiful things in life. But she went through with the missions because she knew that it would be for the greater good, which in her eyes was a continent at peace and one that would be filled with freedom and hope. 82 years from when they first joined the resistance, their message still rings true to both myself and countless others. When we see peace threatened and freedom stifled, even though it may be easier to turn away, to hide from the truth, we need to have the courage in order to confront those responsible directly, lest we repeat the mistakes of the past. Resistance was encountered in all facets of society, including those actively persecuted by the Nazis, most notably the Jewish inhabitants of the Warsaw Ghetto. Constructed in August 1940, the ghetto was meant to be a stopgap until the infamous Treblinka complex could be completed. However, this did not make the situation in the ghetto any better, as 450,000 individuals were crammed into its tight quarters. By summer 1942, it had become apparent that quote-unquote relocations to concentration camps would soon occur. So the Jewish Military Union, or Żydowskie Związek Wojskowy in Polish, with initially a mere 20 members, had taken up arms smuggled in by sympathetic Poles and couriers for the Polish government in exile, in an attempt to prevent what many knew would be the extermination of all inside the ghetto. The ZZW reached 500 members by summer 1942, enough for an uprising. Thus, later in summer, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising had occurred. In all, the uprising significantly hampered the transport of ghetto inhabitants to both the Treblinka and Majdanek complexes significantly, saving innumerable lives. However, most Żydowski Związek Wojskowy members were captured, most notably the unknown Warsaw Ghetto boy, known from the 1943 photo captured during the ghetto's dissolution. After the war, the photo would become the symbol for resistance against the horrors of human conflict. This spoke greatly to me as it served to remind me of New Zealand's own Tomb of the Unknown Warrior, the penultimate symbol for those who had served New Zealand but could not be reconnected physically with their identity. Although their names may have slipped through the cracks of time, we will always remember them, each as little but nonetheless significant pieces that make up the complex mosaic of our nation's identity. Similar to the actions in the Warsaw Ghetto, outside in the main city of Warsaw, the Polish underground government had also planned an insurrection. This insurrection started on the 1st of August 1944 and was spurred on by the plethora of socioeconomic issues that Poland saw under occupation, including crackdowns on free speech and commerce. The diversity of the insurrectionists' backgrounds cannot be understated, as people from all backgrounds united against their occupiers. Such was the case of August Brown, who was of Nigerian descent. As Brown was a subject of the British Empire, his family urged him to emigrate to the United Kingdom, preceding the imminent invasion of Poland. But Brown refused, stating his intentions in preserving the sovereignty of his beloved country. The story of Brown gives an important precedent for us today, as he shows that resistance is not something that belongs to the domain of any particular group of people. Instead, Brown has shown us that resistance is a universal tool which each of us have been endowed with in order to do what is right, not only for ourselves, but others too. In Brown's instance, his actions also distracted the overstretched Nazi troops enough that it indirectly facilitated acclaimed photographer and resistance fighter Eugeniusz Lukowski in capturing more than 1,000 images of war-torn Warsaw. Even today, all these photographs still hold special significance to the Polish state in remembering the 63-day Warsaw Uprising, so that future generations may learn of the enormous sacrifices that Brown, Lukowski, and countless others had given. It is at this moment I would also like to acknowledge the sacrifices that the late Paul Seideman has made for HCNZ. Paul would be 13 when he was sent to the Lodz Ghetto before being transported to Auschwitz. Around 1.3 million people were forced into the facilities at Auschwitz. 1.1 million of those would never step out alive again. Paul was one of the lucky few who managed to make it out at age 17. Yet instead of living in fear's shadow of what he had endured and witnessed, Paul would eventually create the Paul Seideman Annual Composition Prize for students across New Zealand to partake in. I can say with much certainty myself that this opportunity has opened my eyes and allowed me to learn much more about the Holocaust than I would have ever anticipated. And I can say with much certainty that the hundreds, if not thousands of students that would have taken part over the years would have the exact same thing to say. To conclude, while it is important to reflect on the inhumanity of Nazi Germany and how it ruthlessly separated people based on differences, the remarkable actions of groups such as the Overstegens, the Jewish Military Union, and the Polish underground resistance have left their mark on history by choosing to stand in defiance of terror when others simply accepted Nazi rule. Their stories set an invaluable precedent, so even when we face adversity against the good of mankind today, we too must stand up, even if those around us remain silent. Thank you.